"It's too big," she whispered. The rancher was shocked by the mail-order bride's request. He wiped his hands on his jeans, feeling the rough fabric against his skin. His heart was beating faster than usual, though he tried to hide it. Today was the day he would meet her, the woman who, through letters and careful arrangements, had agreed to leave her home thousands of miles away to start a new life with him. A mail-order bride, yes, but more than that, someone who could possibly become the companion he had longed for in the quiet isolation of his ranch. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Around him, the small station was quiet except for the occasional cough or the distant clatter of train wheels on rails. Few people were around at this hour. Most of the locals had already returned home or were finishing their work in the nearby fields. Daniel, however, could not take his mind off what was about to happen. He had spent weeks preparing, checking the house, cleaning the ranch, and even brushing up on the little Russian phrases he had learned from the letters she had sent. He wanted her to feel welcome, to feel at ease in this vast, unfamiliar world. The train whistle pierced the still afternoon, growing louder as it approached the station. Dust swirled in the sunlight, creating small golden clouds around the tracks. Daniel straightened his back and tried to look confident, though a nervous flutter remained in his stomach. He watched as the train slowed and finally came to a gentle stop. Steam hissed from the engine and the car doors began to open. And then she appeared. Elena Petrova stepped off the train, her movements graceful but slightly cautious. She was dressed simply, a modest blouse and skirt, and carried a single suitcase in one hand. Her hair was neatly tied back and her eyes scanned the platform, taking in her surroundings with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Daniel felt an unexpected pang. She was nothing like the woman he had imagined from the letters. She was softer, more delicate, yet there was a quiet strength in her posture, a steadiness in the way she looked at him. "Mr. Harper?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. Her accent was noticeable but not heavy, and her English, though accented, was perfectly understandable. "Yes," Daniel replied, his own voice catching slightly. "I'm Daniel, welcome." He took a step forward, offering a handshake which she accepted politely. Their hands met briefly, and Daniel felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. This was real. She was here in his world now, about to step into a life completely different from the one she had known. Her suitcase in hand, they started toward the small car waiting to take them to the ranch. The streets were quiet, lined with modest houses and a few shops, the air warm and dry. As they drove, Elena kept glancing out the window, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the open fields, the distant hills, and the scattered farmhouses. Daniel noticed her curiosity and felt a flicker of hope. She was interested, alert, paying attention to everything. Perhaps this could work. For a while they spoke in short exchanges, polite questions and answers. She asked about the journey, about the town, and about him. Daniel responded as best as he could, careful not to overwhelm her with too much information. He talked about the ranch, about the cattle, about the daily routines, but he noticed her listening intently, nodding occasionally, her eyes focused and thoughtful. There was a hint of nerves in her demeanor, but also a spark of determination, a willingness to understand. The car turned onto a dusty dirt road and the landscape began to change. Fields stretched endlessly, dotted with grazing cattle and a few scattered barns. The house appeared in the distance, a sturdy, weathered structure with a wide porch, surrounded by fences and the tools of ranch life. Elena's eyes widened as she took in the size of the property. She didn't speak at first, only looking around as though trying to comprehend the scale of this new world. When they arrived at the house, Daniel stepped out first and opened the door for her. She followed, placing her suitcase gently on the porch. He noticed her hesitation, the slight pause before she took her first steps inside. The house smelled of polished wood and old leather, the faint scent of hay carried in from the barns. Daniel led her through the main rooms, pointing out simple details. The kitchen, the living area, the small study where he handled ranch records, and the guest bedroom that had been prepared for her. "This will be your room," Daniel said. Alina nodded, giving a small smile. She walked slowly into the room, touching the quilt on the bed, inspecting the curtains, the neat arrangement of furniture. Daniel could sense her need to process everything at her own pace. They spent the evening quietly, sharing a simple meal. Daniel tried to keep the conversation light, asking about her journey, her family, and the letters she had sent. She spoke softly, choosing her words carefully, revealing small pieces of herself, her love of reading, her skill in cooking, her admiration for animals. Daniel listened, sometimes offering small smiles, sometimes asking questions to draw her out. There was an awkwardness between them, natural for strangers meeting under unusual circumstances, but also a quiet tension of mutual curiosity. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, they stepped outside onto the porch. The vast expanse of the ranch stretched out before them, fields fading into hills, the silhouettes of cattle moving slowly in the distance. The air was calm, the kind of stillness that only comes in the countryside, far from the noise of towns and cities. Alina took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "It is very different," she whispered. Daniel turned to her, unsure what she meant. "From what I expected," she continued, her voice almost a whisper. "Bigger, so big." Step by step. As night fell, they returned inside. Daniel showed her to the guest room, offering her the comfort of privacy after a long day. She thanked him quietly, a soft smile playing on her lips. He left her to settle in, stepping outside briefly to look at the stars. The ranch was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant lowing of cattle. Daniel felt a mix of relief and anticipation. She had arrived safely, and the first impressions were cautiously positive, but he knew this was only the beginning. Back inside, Alina unpacked slowly, placing a few personal items on the small dresser, arranging her suitcase with care. She paused by the window, looking out at the open fields, taking in the enormity of what lay ahead. Her thoughts wandered to home, to family, to the life she had left behind. She felt a pang of fear, a whisper of doubt. Could she truly adjust to this new world? Could she fit into a life so vast, so different from everything she knew? But alongside the fear was a spark of hope. Daniel had been kind, patient, and surprisingly gentle. He seemed willing to help her adjust, to guide her through the unfamiliar. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing a deep breath, and tried to imagine herself not as a stranger in a foreign land, but as someone who could belong here, step by step, day by day. And so, the first night at the ranch passed quietly, filled with anticipation and unspoken questions. Both Daniel and Alina lay awake for a time, thinking about what tomorrow might bring, about the challenges of adapting, and about the fragile beginnings of trust and understanding. It was a beginning, tentative, cautious, but full of possibility. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The ranch was vast, the life ahead demanding, but for the first time, both of them sensed that perhaps they could navigate it together. She had arrived, and he was ready to meet her halfway. The story of two strangers from opposite worlds brought together by chance was only just beginning, and neither of them could yet imagine how deeply their lives would change. The morning sun poured through the windows, casting a golden glow across the ranch house. Alina woke to the soft sounds of the countryside, birds chirping, cattle lowing in the distance, and the faint rustle of wind through the trees. She sat on the edge of the bed, stretching her arms and taking in the quiet stillness. The house was different from anything she had known. It smelled of wood and leather with faint traces of hay from the barns outside. It was simple, yet full of life. She dressed slowly, choosing modest clothes suitable for work on a ranch, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and soil. Daniel was already outside, checking on the horses. He waved at her, a small smile on his face. "Good morning," he called. "Sleep well." Alina watched as Daniel moved around the kitchen with ease, chopping vegetables and preparing the food with practiced efficiency. She wanted to help but hesitated, unsure of the proper way to handle the unfamiliar tools and routines. Daniel noticed her hesitation and offered gentle guidance. "Here, try this," he said, handing her a knife. "Just take your time. No rush." After breakfast, Daniel suggested they take a walk around the ranch. Alina agreed, curious to see more of the land she would soon call home. They walked along dirt paths, past fields dotted with grazing cattle, past barns filled with tools and equipment, and past pastures stretching endlessly toward distant hills. Alina's eyes were wide with wonder. She asked questions about everything: the horses, the fences, the irrigation system, and even the different types of grass used for feeding cattle. Daniel answered patiently, explaining the work required to maintain the ranch. "It's a lot of work," he said, "but it's worth it. Every day is different. You learn something new all the time." Alina nodded, listening intently. She admired his knowledge and the quiet confidence with which he carried himself. Despite the physical labor, there was a rhythm to his life, a sense of purpose that fascinated her. As they walked past the storage barn, Alina's gaze lingered on the large tools and equipment stored inside. Her expression changed slightly, a mixture of curiosity and unease crossing her face. Daniel noticed but did not comment immediately. He could tell she was still adjusting, still trying to understand the scale of everything around her. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Alina learned small chores, starting with feeding the animals and cleaning the stables. Daniel guided her patiently, showing her how to handle the horses and cattle safely. She was cautious at first, afraid of making mistakes, but her natural intelligence and determination helped her pick up the routines quickly. Each small success gave her more confidence, though she still felt the weight of the new life she had entered. Evenings were quieter, spent in conversation or simple tasks around the house. Daniel shared stories of his life on the ranch, of challenges he had faced, and of the joys that came with working closely with the land and animals. Alina listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply absorbing the stories. She began to understand the depth of commitment required for this life, the patience needed, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing the results of one's hard work. Despite her growing comfort, there was still an undercurrent of hesitation. One evening, as they tended to the horses together, Alina paused, her hand lingering on the reins. She looked at Daniel, her eyes searching. "It is much bigger than I thought," she said softly. Daniel frowned slightly, unsure what she meant. "The ranch?" he asked gently. "Yes," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Everything, the work, the land, the life here." She looked down, fiddling with the strap of her glove. "I do not know if I can manage it all." "You're not alone." It was overwhelming, and she was beginning to understand that honesty about her limits was necessary. Over the next week, Daniel observed subtle changes in Alina. She was more confident in her chores, but she still approached large tasks with caution. She asked questions, often pausing to think carefully before acting. Daniel realized that she was not unwilling or incapable. She simply needed time to adapt to the vastness of ranch life. He admired her determination and intelligence, and he began to appreciate her perspective, the way she noticed details he sometimes overlooked. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, Alina suddenly stepped back, brushing dirt from her hands. She looked at the long stretch of fence and then at Daniel, her expression hesitant. "It is too much," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel stopped, surprised. "What is too much?" he asked, concerned. She hesitated, glancing around at the fields and barns. "The work, the ranch, everything. I do not mean to complain, but it is so big, so many things to do." "I am not sure I can." Her voice trailed off, uncertainty filling the space between them. Daniel realized that this was the moment she had been holding back. She was finally admitting her fear, her concern about adjusting to this new life. He felt a mixture of surprise and empathy. He had expected some difficulty, but hearing her voice it aloud made it real. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Alina," he said gently, "I understand. It is a lot. I know it seems overwhelming, but you do not have to do everything at once. You will learn slowly. You do not need to be perfect. I am here to help you. We will take it one step at a time. You are not alone here." She was observant, noticing patterns in the animal's behavior and even suggesting small improvements to daily routines. She had a natural curiosity and intelligence that complemented his practical experience. Slowly, he began to see her not just as someone he had arranged to marry, but as a partner who could contribute meaningfully to life on the ranch. At the same time, Alina was learning about Daniel in ways she had not expected. He was patient, kind, and thoughtful, but also firm when necessary. He expected effort and honesty, but he did not demand perfection. She began to feel a sense of belonging, small though it was at first. The vast fields, the long days, and the hard work no longer seemed entirely daunting. They were challenges she could meet, especially with Daniel's guidance. One evening, after a long day of feeding cattle and repairing fences, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the silhouettes of cows moving slowly across the fields. Alina took a deep breath, feeling a mix of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. "I think I am beginning to understand," she said softly. Daniel looked at her, curious. "Understand what?" he asked. "This life. It is not easy," she said, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "But it is honest. There is work and there is purpose. Perhaps I can." Her voice trailed off, but Daniel could see the hope forming in her expression. He nodded, smiling gently. "Yes, you can. It will take time, but you will. I believe in you." The ranch was still big, the work still demanding, but she could see a path forward. And Daniel, for his part, was beginning to feel a growing respect and admiration for her resilience, intelligence, and determination. As night fell, they returned inside. The house was quiet except for the crackle of the fireplace. Alina prepared a small dinner, and Daniel helped set the table. They shared a simple meal, their conversation light but meaningful. They laughed softly at small mistakes, shared stories of their pasts, and slowly a bond began to form, fragile, tentative, but real. By the time Alina went to bed, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. The ranch was still vast, still intimidating in many ways, but she had begun to see that with patience, guidance, and honesty, she could adapt. She closed her eyes, thinking about the days ahead, and for the first time felt a flicker of hope. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to grow. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, knowing that she was not alone, and that perhaps in this strange new world she could find a place to belong. Days passed, and life on the ranch began to settle into a rhythm. Alina had grown more comfortable with her daily chores. She could feed the animals with more confidence, manage the stables without constant guidance, and even anticipate some of the needs of the ranch. Daniel watched her progress with quiet admiration. He had expected her to struggle at first, but her intelligence, determination, and willingness to learn impressed him. Still, he noticed moments when she hesitated, when a shadow of doubt crossed her eyes, and he wondered if she was truly adjusting as well as she appeared. One late afternoon, Daniel was fixing a fence near the northern pasture when he noticed Alina walking slowly toward him, her hands clasped in front of her. There was a hesitation in her step, a small uncertainty that immediately drew his attention. "Daniel," she said softly, "can we talk?" Alina took a deep breath, then looked at him, her eyes searching. She began, then paused, struggling to find the words. "I did not want to say this before. I tried to manage, but now I feel I must tell you." She looked down, twisting her hands nervously. Daniel waited patiently, giving her the space to speak. I feel overwhelmed," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not the animals, not the chores, the whole life here. It is so big, so much more than I imagined. But you've been doing well. You're learning. Step by step, day by day, you'll grow more comfortable." I want to, but I'm afraid." "Alina," he said softly, "you don't have to do everything perfectly. No one expects that of you. Life on a ranch, it is a learning process for anyone, even someone who has lived here all their life. You will make mistakes, you will stumble, and that is okay. What matters is your willingness to try. That is already more than enough. What if I fail? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I do not want to disappoint you. I want to belong here, but sometimes I feel I am too small for this life. I am not here to judge or demand. I am here to help, to support you, and to work together with you. Life on this ranch is not a test. It is a journey, one we take together. That feeling will pass. You will find your rhythm, I promise, but you have to give yourself time and patience, and you have to allow me to help you. We do this together, not alone. I like that. She looked around at the vast fields, the barns, the horses grazing in the distance, and the sun sinking low behind the hills. It is so big, she whispered again, but perhaps with guidance I can learn to manage it. Alina began approaching tasks with more confidence, though she continued to voice her concerns honestly. Daniel adapted too, slowing his pace when teaching her new chores and offering gentle advice rather than orders. They spent long afternoons together, repairing fences, tending animals, and walking the fields. In these shared moments, an unspoken bond began to grow. One evening, after a long day of feeding cattle and mending fences, Alina invited Daniel to the guest house where she had been staying. Her expression was earnest, her eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I want to talk," she said softly. They sat together at the small kitchen table. Alina took a deep breath and began. "Daniel, I need to ask something. I'm afraid it may sound strange. Can you help me? Not just with the chores, but with understanding this life, with being part of it." He saw her honesty, her courage in asking for help rather than pretending she could handle everything immediately. "Alina," he said gently, "I can do that. I will help you. Not because I have to, but because I want to. You are not alone in this. Life here is large, yes, but it is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to be shared, learned, and experienced together. I will be here every step of the way. That is what I want with you." Daniel slowed his pace when introducing new tasks, explaining each step carefully and allowing Alina to ask questions freely. He encouraged her to voice her concerns and celebrate small successes. Alina, in turn, became more confident, learning not just the physical tasks of ranch life, but also the rhythm and logic behind them. She began anticipating what needed to be done, discovering her own solutions, and taking initiative in ways that impressed Daniel. Evenings were filled with conversation and shared laughter. They discussed the letters Alina had written before her arrival, her memories of home, and Daniel's stories of growing up on the ranch. Slowly, their relationship deepened, built not on formal arrangements or expectations, but on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. One quiet afternoon, while walking along the edge of the pasture, Alina looked out at the wide expanse of land and said softly, "It is still big, but it feels smaller somehow. Less overwhelming. That means you are adjusting. Life here is still challenging, but it is no longer frightening." The ranch was still vast, the work still demanding, but Alina was growing into this life. And Daniel, in turn, was learning the importance of patience, understanding, and partnership. By the end of part 3, a quiet transformation had taken place. Alina's initial fear and hesitation had been met with Daniel's calm support and guidance. She had begun to see the vast ranch not as a barrier, but as a landscape to be explored, understood, and eventually mastered. Their bond had deepened, moving beyond arrangement into real companionship, built on honesty, trust, and shared effort. And though the journey ahead was still long, both of them knew that together, they could face the challenges step by step, day by day. The days on the ranch continued to pass, each one bringing a blend of challenges and small victories. Alina had grown noticeably more confident in her work. Feeding the animals no longer made her hesitate. She could handle the horses with steady hands, manage the stables, and even anticipate some of the tasks before Daniel reminded her. Each day, she discovered that she was capable of more than she had imagined when she first arrived. Daniel noticed the change in her and felt a quiet pride. He had always hoped she would adapt, but he also knew that transformation required patience, guidance, and understanding. Over time, he realized that this was not just about learning the chores of ranch life. It was about building trust, nurturing confidence, and creating a partnership that could withstand the difficulties of rural life. One morning, as the sun rose over the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Alina and Daniel set out to repair a section of the fence that had been damaged during a recent storm. The work was tough and required cooperation. Daniel held the post steady while Alina hammered the nails in place. They worked side by side, speaking occasionally to discuss the progress and share observations. Alina paused for a moment, wiping sweat from her brow. "Daniel," she said, "I feel stronger. I think I can manage more than before. And you're learning faster than most would expect." The words she spoke reflected more than just physical adaptation. They spoke of emotional adjustment, of acceptance, and of a growing sense of belonging. He realized that the real transformation had happened not only in her skills, but in her confidence and comfort with life on the ranch. As the days passed, their bond continued to deepen. They shared long afternoons walking through the fields, repairing fences and tending to the animals. They spoke about their pasts, their families, and their dreams for the future. Each conversation strengthened their understanding of each other, building trust and respect. Daniel admired Alina's determination, her intelligence, and the quiet strength that had carried her through her fears. Alina, in turn, appreciated Daniel's patience, guidance, and the calm confidence he exuded in the face of challenges. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the hills. The sky was ablaze with color, and the air was filled with the sounds of the countryside. Alina leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. "I never thought I could feel this way," she said softly. "I was so afraid when I arrived, afraid I could not belong here, afraid I would fail. But now," she smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight, "now it feels possible. You've grown stronger, braver, and more confident than when you first arrived. I am proud of you." She realized that what had seemed so overwhelming at first had become manageable, not because the ranch had changed, but because she had grown, and because she had not faced the challenges alone. The next few weeks brought further integration into ranch life. Alina began taking initiative, noticing tasks that needed attention without being prompted. She repaired small fences on her own, helped care for the younger animals, and even suggested improvements to the feeding schedule. Daniel observed these changes with admiration and respect. He saw not only her growing competence, but also the emergence of her own sense of authority and independence on the ranch. Evenings were spent in quiet companionship. They shared meals, discussed the day, and sometimes simply sat in silence, enjoying the peacefulness of the surroundings. Their bond continued to strengthen, moving beyond mere partnership in chores to a deeper emotional connection. Alina's initial fears, expressed in the whisper of "it is too big," had transformed into a shared understanding that life on the ranch was challenging but navigable together. One afternoon, while walking along a path near the river that ran through the property, Alina paused to watch the water flow over smooth stones. "Daniel," she said, "I feel at peace here. Not just because I am learning the work, but because I know I am not alone. You are here. I can ask for help and you listen. That is important." It was a far cry from the nervousness and hesitation she had felt in the first days at the ranch. She now understood that belonging was not about immediate mastery of every task or flawless performance. It was about patience, guidance, shared effort, and mutual respect. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Alina's confidence grew steadily, and she began to enjoy the routines that had once seemed intimidating. She took pride in her work, found joy in the small victories of ranch life, and began to see herself as an integral part of the household. Daniel, for his part, became increasingly reliant on her presence, not just for the work she did, but for the companionship, understanding, and warmth she brought to the ranch. One evening, as they repaired a section of the barn roof together, Alina paused and looked out at the sprawling fields. "I never thought I could feel this way," she said softly. "When I first arrived, everything seemed too big, too overwhelming. But now it feels manageable. It feels right. You've found your place here, not just in the work but in life itself." Together, they repaired damage from storms, cared for sick animals, and managed the long hours that ranch life demanded. Each difficulty they faced only strengthened their bond, reminding them both of the importance of teamwork, understanding, and patience. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. They celebrated small milestones, a successful harvest, a new calf born on the ranch, the completion of a long-term project. These moments of achievement, shared and acknowledged, became symbols of their growing connection. The ranch, once intimidating in its size and demands, had transformed into a landscape of opportunity, growth, and companionship. One cool evening, as the sky turned deep shades of purple and the stars began to appear, Alina and Daniel sat together on the porch, watching the fireflies dance above the fields. She leaned back, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent. "Daniel," she said, "I never thought I could find this peace, purpose, a sense of belonging, but now I do. And it is because of you." The whispered fear of the first days, "It is too big," had evolved into a quiet understanding that challenges could be met, fears could be overcome, and life could be shared. The ranch, with all its vastness and demands, was no longer overwhelming. It was home. As night settled over the land, they remained on the porch, hands entwined, sharing the quiet peace of the countryside. They spoke softly of dreams for the future, of small plans and aspirations, and of the life they were building together. Every word, every gesture, reinforced the trust and partnership they had forged. By the time they went inside, Alina felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had arrived in a world that once seemed impossible to navigate, and through patience, guidance, and courage, she had grown to belong. Daniel, too, felt a deep satisfaction. The woman who had arrived so nervous and uncertain had become his partner in life and in work, someone he respected, trusted, and admired. The story of two strangers brought together by chance and letters across continents had transformed into a tale of partnership, growth, and understanding. The ranch was still large, the work still demanding, but neither of them faced it alone. Together, they had learned that challenges could be shared, fears could be voiced, and life could be embraced. And as Alina whispered once more, looking across the fields with a contented smile, it was no longer a statement of fear. It was a reminder of how far she had come, how much she had grown, and how, together with Daniel, she had found her place in a world that once felt impossibly big.